Rusty presents the Magnus Arse. Episode 367. We all ignore the dead woman walking. Statement of Jack
Know a man regarding the alleged disappearance of his acquaintance Down. Original statement given August 20th, 2022. Audio recording by Jonathan Sims, head archivist of the Magnus Institute, London. Statement begins. I first met Dan 2 years ago, more or less. It's hard to say exactly when we first met or even started talking, as we were taking a class together at the time. I'm sure there was plenty of discussion or interaction before we learned each other's names, but I started my course in September of 2005, so yeah, about 2 years. If you think that sounds boring, well, yeah, it is. And it was either that or become an alcoholic, so... Sorry, I'm going off topic. I initially found Down a bit off-putting, to be honest. She was a bit older than me, maybe 10 years or so. I never asked her age, we weren't that close, but she was starting to grey at the edges of her hair, and you could see that the tiredness on her face wasn't just from missing a single night's sleep. That's not to say she was bad-looking. She had a round, open sort of face and quite deep red eyes, but very much not my type. She was well-spoken in group work, at least when she did speak, and I think it came up once that she'd been to Finland, though I don't know what college. I'd noticed earlier that during lectures, she always seemed to be scribbling furiously in a notebook, even when the lecturer wasn't speaking. Not to mention, I asked to borrow her notes once for an essay, and she gave me this weird look and said she ate them. So yeah, point is, I wouldn't have called her a friend, but we got on all right. It was about 4 months into my course that I first encountered Down outside of the university. I was riding the night bus home, having gone for a couple of drinks and missed the regular service. Of course, regular also means drunk and angry vomiters, so yeah, I generally try to be unobtrusive, sitting in a seat at the back of the top floor. It was there that I saw Down. She was sat right at the front, staring out of the window. People watching is one of my guilty pleasures, so I decided not to say hello, at least not right away. She seemed to be intently scanning the street for something, except that at times she would crane her neck to stare at the roofs of the buildings passing by. She seemed nervous as well, and was breathing way faster than normal. It was slightly alarming to watch, to be honest, and I finally made up my mind to tell her I was there. She jumped a bit when I greeted her, and I asked her if she was all right. She told me she didn't usually stay out so late, and found nighttime public transport unsettling. I sat next to her and she seemed to get much more relaxed, so I didn't push the issue. We talked for a while about nothing in particular until the bus started to approach my stop. As I rose, I noticed that Down had stood up at the exact same time as I had, and I realized with some discomfort that we must live at the same stop. I liked the guy fine, don't get me wrong, but I'm just a private person. I decided to just walk back with her as far as necessary and make sure she didn't see what building I went into. Maybe we weren't even walking in the same direction. Yeah, we were walking in exactly the same direction. It was at that point I felt a hand grab my shoulder and throw me into the road. I don't know how else to describe it. One moment I was walking along, the next I was flying towards the ground. It can't have been Down, she was kind of weak. Anyway, there weren't any cars coming, but I hit my head hard. I think I must have been unconscious for a few seconds, because the next thing I remember is a panicky Down on the phone to an ambulance. I tried to tell her I was all right, but didn't really manage to get the words out, which, yeah, probably meant I wasn't all right. The ambulance arrived in pretty good time, considering it was a Friday night, and the paramedics gave me a look over. I was told that the injury itself wasn't serious. Apparently head wounds always bleed that much, and it's nothing to panic about. But that I did have quite a nasty concussion and shouldn't be left alone for the next few hours. In retrospect, this was likely the concussion talking, but the upshot was I agreed to go back to Dan's flat to recover. She was quite awkward about the whole thing and took great pains to assure me that there was nothing untoward about the situation. Apparently she was asexual, which I'll admit did actually reassure me a bit. Still, it was clear this wasn't how either of us had hoped to be ending our nights. As it turned out, Dan's flat was directly across the street from mine, just a couple of floors lower. The flat itself was a simple affair, quite big. It had only a few pieces of furniture and a lot of bookshelves, each covered with rows and rows of identical notebooks, with no apparent marking system or indication of contents. I started to ask about them, but my head throbbed and I didn't feel up to any answer that might have been forthcoming. Dan led me to the sofa and disappeared to fetch me an ice pack and a mug of sugary tea. I graciously accepted both, though I wasn't in much of a mood to talk. Dan clearly felt awkward enough with the silence to do the talking for both of us, and I learned more about it over the next hour than I'd ever had a desire to know. Apparently Dan didn't need to work anymore, and so had found herself somewhat adrift, taking night college courses to pass the time and broaden her mind. Her words, not mine. She said she was trying to figure out what to actually do with her life. She talked on like this for a while, but I stopped listening about that point as I'd become enraptured by her body. She was beautiful, and there was something in the way she moved that really got me, with a snaking pattern of lines weaving their way around towards the center. The pattern was hypnotic and shifted as I watched it like an optical illusion. I found my eyes following the lines towards the middle of Dan noticed me staring and told me to kindly fucking stop. By this time I was beginning to feel well enough to leave.
And Martin, good lord, man, if you're going to be staying in the archives, at least have the decency to put some trousers on.
Oh, God, sorry. Sorry, I didn't think you were in until later. It's not even 7 yet.
I've been coming in early in the hopes of leaving this place before dark.
Well, it's been a week, and we've seen nothing. Do you really think she's still out there?
I have no idea. But I don't intend to take any chances.
No, I suppose not.
Now, if you'll excuse me.
Righto.
Statement continues.
I started to make my excuses to down him. She expressed her concern, said it hadn't been long enough as the medics suggested, but if I had to, well, you get the picture. In the end, I did leave, as I kept getting lost in the lines of her body. I went straight home. Oh, yeah, that's right, straight. There was no gate. Turns making sure Dan couldn't see me from her window, and spent a few hours watching TV until I recovered enough to go to sleep. By the time I woke up the next morning, I was feeling more or less okay. One evening, a few days later, though, I found myself staring out of my window, the one that faced the street, and I remembered how close down lived. I looked to see if I could figure out which window was hers, and yeah, sure enough, there it was. I decided to turn off the light in my flat, so she wouldn't see me if she looked up. And then I went back to watching her. Yeah, I know that sounds creepy. It really wasn't meant to be. I said earlier that I really enjoy people watching, and regardless of how boring she may have been to speak to, Dan was weirdly compelling to watch. So that's just what I did. And not just that night either. Yeah, there's no non-sinister way to say that watching Dan became my hobby. It was strange, I'll admit it, but I just couldn't stop myself. And in my defense, I would have stopped a lot sooner if it hadn't been for the bizarre things she would do. She would constantly reorder her journals, without any apparent system of organization, most of the time without even opening them. Sometimes, she would grab an apparently random notebook from the shelves and start scribbling in it, even though I could see that the page was already covered in writing. Once, and I swear this is true, as I saw her take one of her notebooks and start to tear out the pages one at a time. And then, slowly and deliberately, she ate them. It must have taken her 3 hours to get through the whole book, but she didn't stop or pause. She just kept going. I finally decided I had to phone the police, though I didn't have any idea what to tell them. In the end, I simply said I'd seen someone suspicious and hung up before they could ask me who was calling. Then I waited and watched the darkened flat opposite. I couldn't look away. I was convinced that if I stopped staring, that Dan would start eating again. About 10 minutes later, I saw a police car driving up the street. No sirens, no flashing lights, but they were here, and right away I started to feel better. Looking up, though, I saw the light had come on in Dan's flat. But as the police pressed the buzzer outside her building, I saw someone walking towards the door to let them in. It wasn't down. I can't stress enough how much this was not down. She looked completely different. She was dressed in Dam's clothes, though. I recognized the shirt from my months of watching, but she was not Dawn. I watched as Not Dam walked to the door and let the two police officers in. They talked for a while, and Not Dam looked concerned, and together they started to search the flat. I watched. At one point, I saw one of the police pick up a dark red shape that I recognized as a passport. My heart beat faster as I saw her open it and look at Not Dawn, clearly comparing, waiting for the moment when she detected the imposter. But instead she just laughed, shook Not Dawn's hand, and they left. I watched the police car drive away, feeling a sense of helplessness. And when I looked up, she was standing at Dam's window, looking back at me. I stood there frozen as her wide, staring eyes met mine, and a cold, toothy smile spread across her face. Then in one swift motion she drew the curtains and was gone. I didn't sleep that night, and I never saw Dam again. I tried to find evidence of the old Dam, but anything I could find online with a picture, it was always a picture of this new person. I even asked some of my old classmates, but none of them seemed to remember her at all. I moved out a week later, and I never saw her again. Statement ends. I'd be tempted to dismiss this as hallucination resulting from long-term head trauma complications, but God came through with this one and managed to get hold of Ms. Dow's journals. Just says the same thing on every page. The words, "keep watching," over and over again. Recording ends.
The MagnusArse.com is a podcast and licensed under a Creative Commons share license. Today's episode was written by
God knows who knows. Please give
donations and view links, images, videos, and show notes. Visit Rusty.
Please
Visit Rusty.
his elite.
Rate and review us on iTunes. Visit us on Facebook. Tweet us on Twitter at The Rusty Rust, or email us at mail@therealrustypodcast.com. Thanks for listening.